one short announcement before we get into the whole thing. Today we're gonna have 2 parts for the recap, just because uploading from my iPad for over 15 minutes is really hard, but it was really important for me to say all the things I wanted to say. Hello fellow Earpers, and welcome back to my Wynonna Earp recap. Today we're going to talk about episode 208 called No Future in the Past, and boy, so many answers and so many questions. Maybe right before we start, I have a lot to criticize in this episode. I like that we got so many answers to the history of the curse, but during the recap you will notice that there are a lot of points where I'm not really comfortable with how the episode dealt with it, but let's dive right into it and we'll see. We're going to start with a short timeline of what actually happened in the past during Wynonna's vision quest. So kind of to get everything in order, because a few things were, let's say, a bit in chaos timeline-wise. And I give you a short timeline of what actually happened when, and then we go from there. Like always, I need my smart notes because that was way too complicated to keep it in mind. So the first thing that happens is that Juan Carlos sends a letter to Wynonna Earp, and Wynonna Earp afterwards sends Robert Swain, who later becomes Bobo Del Rey, to find Doc Holliday and to ask him to go with him to Purgatory. And Doc refuses. That is the first scene we actually see. And Robert also says that the sheriff in Purgatory seems to be a demon or like a very cruel man. But Doc refuses. He doesn't want to go with him. And he still has his tuberculosis at this point, so the deal with Constance Clutie happens later. Then, the fun thing, Robert says to Doc that he would go to hell for Wyatt, and that's kind of the foreshadowing for what is going to actually happen to Robert, which is a nice little thing in there. Then we have the scene where Wynonna hears the shots, goes out of the saloon onto the street, and hears this one lady kind of retelling the story of how the demon Clutie, who's also the sheriff of Purgatory, died. And it happens that way that Clutie takes Robert Swain as a human shield. He says, shoot him anyway to Wyatt. Wyatt shoots through Robert into Clutie's heart and doesn't kill him really, but he afterwards gets buried, which means he's currently buried alive. But the moment Clutie gets shot, he curses Wyatt and all his descendants and everyone Wyatt kills. Now we come to a point where we kind of have the first logic flaw in the episode, because last season we got to know that everyone who dies by Wyatt's hand, or even indirectly is killed by Wyatt, like the barber, resurrects as a demon. But now, in this episode, we have Constance Clutie, so the Stone Witch, telling Bobo that everyone who's shot by Peacemaker and killed by Peacemaker resurrects as a demon. These are two very different things. First, everyone who dies killed by Wyatt in whatever extent could be indirectly, and everyone who gets killed by Peacemaker. So just keep in mind that it's not really clear what is the law at the moment. Then we have the next scene where Constance Clutie paralyzes the widows and betrays her husband. She traps the widows with the help of Robert and Juan Carlo. And interesting detail, the box they're trapped in is, I think, actually the confessional of the church. And that's why it's hard for them to actually get out of it, because it's also a sacred place, kind of. But it gets turned into a box, so it's a sacred place you can carry around. Next logic flaw. We've seen this box in the storage of Black Badge. And on this box was a label. On this label it was already said that the operative for the whole thing was Robert Swain. So this was a hint for us that Bobo had something to do with the trapping of the widows, which was really nice. We could see it in, like, I think episode 1, or then at least 2, that Bobo had to do something with it. But the problem is the box was sent from London to New York. But how should Bobo be responsible for sending the box from London to New York when he trapped the widows when he was already dying and becoming a revenant and therefore not being able to leave the Ghost River Triangle? Maybe we get an explanation for it. I think we won't because it's such a small detail, but if you create a label to tease the fans about what might become, maybe do it right. Like, I'd like an explanation for that if we get it, but I'm pretty sure we won't, and then it's just one of these things that doesn't add up. But okay, they trap the widows in the confessional box. Next step. But Constance Clutie says that it's not enough to shoot the demon Clutie and bury him alive. He needs to be sealed because otherwise he would resurrect. She tells the other ones, Juan Carlo and Robert Swain, how to create a seal, so putting iron on silver and saying the words she gave them as an incantation, to create the seals. The three of them decide to not tell each other where they're gonna put the seals and create them, so nobody can become a traitor to the others. The important thing is that in this case, Constance Clutie says that they have to put the seals on sacred ground, so they will be safe from the widows. Interesting thing, she creates her seal, which is her wedding ring, which she gives later on Doc. Doc Holliday's finger is not sacred ground, so she's basically breaking the rules she gave the other ones, which I'm already, again, a bit like, nah, why? Doesn't really make sense. If she explains the rules and then they're not actually rules, why are they there in the first place? We also get to know that Wyatt killed Constance's sons, and it's not really clear when in the timeline, to be honest. It's just clear that they are actually dead. Also, Constance says that if her husband gets free, she has to run for her life, which is not really clear at all why. So she's a traitor to her husband, or to the husband of her and the two other widows later on. But it's not really clear why she then has to run for it. Like, I would have liked the proper explanation for that. But anyway, that is how it is. Then, like, after they leave the church and they're going for creating the seals, this is the moment where Constance gives Doc immortality, because she creates the seal in her wedding ring, creates the spell that grants Doc immortality, gives the ring to Doc to make sure the ring is on the finger of the best gunslinger in the whole West, which is a good place to protect it. My problem with the whole ring thing is that we've seen the other two seals. They vary in sizes, but they clearly bear the same symbolism. And that means for me the symbolism also has to be on Doc's ring, because it doesn't make sense to have two seals that look very similar and one that's just randomly anything, right? Why could you otherwise not just turn the random chair into a seal? Right, there are rules about this. There are rules that make the whole thing logical, and I like them to actually stick with the rules. So either the symbols are on the inside of Doc's ring, because otherwise he would have already recognized them, or they're not there, which would be even more disappointing. I also think Doc Holliday would have taken off his ring at some point during his life, especially while he was trapped in a well. He might have had a suicidal or anger episode where he tried to take it off and just end the whole thing. Doesn't make sense for him to just leave it on for 100 years and never take it off even for a moment. Also, since the spell doesn't end when he takes the ring off, that's why Bobo wants the ring later on, because the immortality spell is connected to the ring and not to the person. So it's not pretty sure when Constance pushes Doc into the well, but it happens at some point, and then we have this whole scene with Constance explaining Robert that he's going to become a demon and go through hell. And she tells him, okay, if you search for the bones of my son, I might save you. He refuses, and then she gives him another option, which is get the ring from Doc Holliday, then you're going to be immortal, and everything's going to be fine. Boba at this point is already jealous of Doc because Wynonna Earp told him that he would come back for him at some point, but he doesn't because he's busy searching for Doc Holliday, who went missing. He's at the bottom of the well because Constant pushed him in there. So Boba goes to the well and tries to get the ring from Doc, but with kind of a dodgy deal. He doesn't free Doc first, he just wants the ring, and he also tells him he has a rope, which he doesn't. So there we already see that Robert Swain is not the good man he's portrayed as earlier. Then we have the scene where Robert Swain dies. He's with Wynonna in the chapel, and he sees Wynonna. And that is a bit of a weird part for me, because until now this whole thing has been a vision quest and not a time travel. But now the two timelines interact with each other. Which is okay. We can deal with that, but it creates logic loopholes. That's always the thing with time travel. But we have Juan Carlo telling Wynonna explicitly that she's all choices. But the moment where we have these two timelines interact with each other, in a way that Wynonna gives Bobo him his later name, and in a way that Wynonna protecting Waverly from Bobo for basically forever, because she says that she's Waverly, influences the future. That means that this had to happen anyway. In the sense of, at the point where Wynonna is where she goes into the church, all of these things happen that have been influenced by this time loop, basically. Which means Wynonna didn't have a choice at all. That was always supposed to happen that way, and then she's not all choices. Which is a contradiction to the whole thing JC said. So, weird, probably logic loophole. Why? Anyway. But that was it for the basic thing of the timeline. Other things that are important this episode, of course we have Waverly's storyline. So we have the first scene where we actually see young Willa trying to kill young Waverly. And Waverly says that Wynonna was the one who dragged her out of the water. But in the end we find out that it was actually Bobo. Which is confusing because now we're not sure if Waverly didn't remember properly or if Waverly actually lied to Wynonna. It could also be that Waverly starts to remember at the end of the episode, and at the beginning of the episode she actually thinks it was Wynonna. Interesting interaction between the whole Bobo past thing and this storyline. Bobo calls Wynonna his angel, or he believes Waverly is his angel. And at the beginning of the episode we hear Wynonna say that her mom, or her and Waverly's mom, always called Waverly angels. What if Waverly is actually the daughter of the Earp mom and Bobo the Ray? Interesting thought, but we're gonna see later this season. Then we have Waverly deciding for a DNA test, and Nicole hiding the result from her, which I think was very off character. I think Nicole wouldn't open the letter. Nicole would maybe keep the letter from Waverly and warn her that she could not forget whatever she finds there, but I think she wouldn't just open it and then not give it to Waverly. Like, it seems off character. It seems like forced drama in the relationship, which is a bit weird and unnecessary, but it's there. We're gonna deal with it. Maybe Nicole had an irrational day. Then we have Waverly getting on with Rosita quite well, which is nice to see them get together finally, because Rosita was this like one figure which was kind of off on the other side, or trapped in shorties somehow. Also we have Rosita getting kind of uncomfortable with the idea of leaving Purgatory. So what if Rosita's actually a Revenant? I mean, we haven't seen her interact with Peacemaker at all, so she just could be. She also seems to have lived for quite some time in the way Doc interacts with her. So maybe he knows and all the others don't know, and this is going to be a huge, oh no, betrayal, Revenant in our own ranks kind of thing. Gonna see about Rosita's history. At the moment she's kind of a mystery woman.